people out there and thanks again for joining us. This is WorldView, the #1 media company. This is where we always explore everyone's perspectives on things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we have guests, interesting guests. We have Athol Trollip, who is now the leader of the Action SA party in the Eastern Cape. We're also being joined by Mzwanele Manyi, the one and only Mzwanele Manyi. He speaks for the Jacob Zuma Foundation. Lovely to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Solly, and hi there, Athol.
Yeah. Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
Mzwanele is no longer, eh?
Mzwanele kunjani mhlekazi?
Uyabona-ke uthetha nami xa utshoyo. No, very well, thank you.
This is lovely. We're supposed to be joined by Tsepo Matsiba. I have no idea what's going on. He'll join us. He'll meet us along the way. This is not your normal worldview interview where we discuss one particular topic. We want to look at the state of South Africa. Of course, you guys come from different political perspectives and histories. You've changed heads over time. Athol Trollip is known for he started with the DA. Did you start with the DA, Athol, or were you someone else before the DA?
Yeah, I was in the DP and the PFP.
Yeah, there you go. But those were the children, or it was almost like Latin to what Latin is to French and to Spanish and to Italian, right? That's where the whole etymology, the political party etymology of the DA comes from the DP, and you haven't really, yeah. I mean, the Action SA is the real big political jump for you, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's been a completely new experience. It was traumatic for me to leave my previous political party. Mm-hmm. I know that Mzwanele has left his party, and I don't know if he's gone back. I'm sure he'll tell us a bit more about it. But it is traumatic to leave a lifelong political party. For whatever reasons, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think Mzwanele has left the DA. I was told for the ANC. He's left. The ANC is a bit of a difficult animal to analyze these days because there's one faction of it, actually that's normal talk, which is coalesced around former President Jacob Zuma, of which Mzwanele Manyi is the spokesperson. It is not for that faction, but for the foundation that represents former President Zuma. Tsepo Matsiba is a fellow co-host here in these discussions. He's a reputation specialist. He also analyzes, comments on political issues in South Africa. Tsepo, we were worried that you're not joining us. Welcome.
No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. We live in that country where load shedding has become normalized. So
yeah, we cannot not talk about load shedding, but let's talk about Rob Hersov. I don't know, Mr. Manyi, if you saw the video and you saw the responses to what he said last week, and what your views are on that.
Yeah, first let's start by making sure that I'm properly placed in this discussion.
Yes.
I'm not here representing anyone. Mm-hmm. I'm just here in my personal capacity so that I'm free to express my views. Mm-hmm. I did leave the ANC in 2019. In fact, when I did, I gave them a scripture. Matthew, must check the scripture out. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. Okay. That scripture says something to the effect that when the salt has lost its flavor, what do you do with it? You can do nothing with that salt but just to check it out, trample it on your feet, and all of that. I really honestly believe that the ANC had done everything that it could do to get us where we are. I think in South Africa, we can take it from here. We must thank the ANC for all the hard work that it has done to get us where we are. But right now, it has run out of options, as it were. I mean, the leadership of the ANC, as things stand right now, is actually plunging the country. I hear people talking about leg effect and all of that. Absolutely got nothing to do with that. You can actually trace the disasters. These were disasters that were made in this sixth administration. They have made critical, fatal decisions in this administration. So indeed, when I heard Rob saying all the things that he was saying out of frustration, I could really sympathize with his point of view, because Rob would have been one of those guys that would have bought into the mantra of Ramaphosa to say the new dawn, the new beginning, and all of that. And I think Rob would have been one of those people to say, wow, now we're going to get a growth trajectory, as it were.
Right.
But Ramaphosa has been nothing but a walking disaster from everything. You know, there is absolutely no. The point I always make is to people that let's look at. People might even think that you hate Ramaphosa, the person, but the point I always make is let's be objective. Look at all the indices that you can think of, whether it's employment is going wrong, whether it's country debt to GDP is going wrong, whether it's economic growth is going wrong, whether it's gender-based violence or crime in general is going, absolutely nothing is going right in this country. I mean, if you look at the issue of load shedding that you just alluded to now, the amount of load shedding we've had in this administration is more than ever that we've had in load shedding. We're now getting new terms now. It's no longer load shedding, now it's blackouts. As it were. The crisis is deepening. So I really think that more than anything else, the current leadership is really the biggest problem. These guys have got no clue what needs to happen. So for me, as I conclude, for me, I really think that the one thing that the ANC can do for the country, if anything, is to get rid of the entire leadership and all of that. I think maybe then we can begin to see something different.
Okay. Well, before I let Athol in, I just want to say, look, I'm not a believer, so I don't do the Bible and stuff. And I have never experienced salt that lost its flavor. So this is a fascinating discussion. So surely when it's almost, if a cancer enters a body, anybody, it starts at usually at a very localized place and it spreads, right? Surely the cancer that's entered South Africa through the ANC didn't start with Ramaphosa. I mean, Mr. Manyi, come on. All of these things that are happening now have started long ago when President Zuma, whom you speak for, was president, and the level of responsibility that it takes for it.
No. Actually, if the truth be told, back in 2014, President Zuma handed over the SOEs to Ramaphosa from 2014. You must remember. So he's been the chairman of the interministerial committee on all SOEs. So if you see the failure of SOEs now, it means the root, the base of the failure would have been set by Ramaphosa himself. As it were. He was a guy in charge, was a 2IC of President Zuma, but in particular, he was made in charge of this. You must remember that at one point, he was also the chairman of what they called what's that thing at ESCOM? War Room. In that war room, he was the head honcho there. So if anyone wants to trace back the problems to the Zuma administration, you can't leave Ramaphosa out. He was actually at the helm of these SOEs. So the collapse of the SOEs that we see now would have been a very cracked foundation that would have been set by Ramaphosa himself. So we're sitting in this problem because of Ramaphosa's incompetence that started on the 5th administration and is continuing on the 6th administration at even escalated rates.
Okay, so if you're a CEO of a company, Zuma was the CEO of South Africa Inc. He gave Ramaphosa, who was one of his juniors, his main junior, as it were, a responsibility to take care of the SOE. So was there some form of performance management? Surely there would have come a time when the person who gave the responsibilities to Ramaphosa said, hey, come and tell me what you've done. I'm not happy. I'm happy. This is what we're going to do about it. Because the buck stopped with Zuma, didn't it?
Yeah, I think in the latter years, because he probably saw that this thing maybe too late, that there's no progress there. I think it took things back again, but by that time, it was already too late and the politics came in and then President Zuma was removed. But I think anybody today that seeks to try and push this thing to President Zuma is missing the point. Ramaphosa was in charge from the previous administration. He's got a continuity of failure that he had started. I have a sound problem here. I can't hear you if you can.
Yeah, I also thought that was the case.
Yeah.
Solly, there are 3 dots. These, can you hear me, Solly?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, but Solly has the microphone problem. Solly,
Okay.
Solly's on mute, that's why.
Solly,
He's on mute. I can see he's on mute.
yes, but he can't hear us. So
No, I can hear you. I was saying my microphone has been working until Donald told me there was a problem with it. Is my sound okay now this way?
Yeah. Now
yes.
can you-
Okay.
You were on mute, Solly.
But Mr. Manyi has been responding to my questions. So there must be something I have to learn from him. Okay, let's take this on, Mr. Trollip. What are you saying to what we've just spoken about?
Well, I was at the conference. I was at the Bizznews conference. And what Rob Hersov said at the Bizznews conference number 4 is no different to what he said in the previous 2 addresses that he made. So he's spoken at that conference 3 times about the same subject.
Right.
The failure of Ramaphosa, the failure of the ANC, the collapse of our economy, collapse of state-owned. I mean, it was a long address, and it was very specifically focused at Cyril Ramaphosa. And I want to align myself. I do believe that our economy has been broken. Unemployment figures speak about that. I spoke at the same conference and I said, Cyril Ramaphosa famously dubbed the 9 Zuma years as 9 wasted years. And I said that 5 wasted years have continued under Ramaphosa. I mean, and Ramaphosa was sitting next to Zuma for much of that time as a deputy president. I served in the National Assembly. I never heard a word come out of his mouth about during the 9 wasted years. So he's complicit. He's very much complicit in there. I didn't drink the Kool-Aid of Ramaphosa like many South Africans, because I saw somebody who didn't have the courage to do what is necessary in the ANCs to take out the bad eggs or the rotten apples. So as far as I'm concerned, the whole bag of apples are rotten. And I agree with Jimmy there. And,
Mzwanele. It's Mzwanele.
Okay,
Call me MM. Call me MM.
Okay, so, at the same conference, I said that, Ramaphosa the elephant gave birth to a mouse.
Right.
And that has been a real tragedy for South Africa, because there's been no change in trajectory or anything. I differ fundamentally with Mzwanele to blame only Cyril Ramaphosa for what's happened at Eskom. Cyril Ramaphosa, yes, must take the majority of the blame. And I smiled when I heard he was coming back early from his trip to deal with load shedding. I mean, he and Zuma promised us that there would be no more load shedding. Right. When Zuma was president, he said there would be never more load shedding. Well, we've only just had load shedding continuously.
Yeah.
So, I think what's happening is you can't just blame Ramaphosa, but he's the main person to accept blame. But that institution has been systematically bled by intent. First by Chancellor House, which is an investment arm of the ANC that they use to fill their coffers to win elections. So we all know that. They don't deny it anymore. But Hitachi and Chancellor House were the main, let's call them ticks. Ikalane. A tick is a parasitic animal that takes blood out of another animal, and that's what happened. But people like Pravin Gordhan must take responsibility. This heroic minister who's everywhere and does nothing. He must take responsibility for that.
But
the ANC's greatest challenge, and it's become their Achilles heel, which is ultimately going to be the millstone that drags the ANC under, is the fact that they will not act against their own that are undermining the intentions of the ANC. I believe the ANC intentions were initially honorable, but they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And we've seen the ANC being systematically eroded or undermined by greedy people. And there are many people that have got very, very wealthy in the ANC. And unfortunately, it's that mentality of, I will eat today, and as long as I can eat today, I'll eat as much as I can and not think about tomorrow. And that's why we're going to lose another generation of young people in this country, because let me use one example. It's not just state-owned enterprises that have failed. Education has collapsed. Angie Motshekga has been the Minister of Education for, I can't even remember how many years, but certainly 2 decades. I mean, 1 decade, at least 10 years. And you can pass at school now with a 30% pass rate. The attrition of kids at school is, you can't even count them anymore. And our education system is broken, but we spend more on education than any other developing nation in the world. And she hasn't been fired. It looks like she's set to stay there, well, certainly until 2024, because in 2024, all those lazy clown ministers that Rob Hersov referred to are going to be removed, with or without the ANC's president's intention to do that.
Okay. Okay. Chris Sonapul wrote earlier to agree with you that the CEO, the big guy, must take responsibility, not just the small guy. Tsepo, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, look, I mean, you as a leader, the buck obviously stops with you, and you can't say that the responsibility is now around the people that you appointed, the cabinet that you've appointed, and if that cabinet is not responsible, they don't react quick enough to solve complex problems that the country is facing, you may have to take responsibility, because as a leader, that is your space. Going back to Rob and his remarks, I've watched him for the last couple of years, and honestly, he brings up some thoughts, and he sparks thoughts about, in as candid as he possibly could, about the difficult challenges that the country is facing, including the energy sector or the energy crisis. He talks about the crime, I mean, the obvious things that we know about. The issues are around gender-based violence and the excessive nature of it, but importantly, the economy, where we usually host this investment conference every year, or every second year, and at that conference, a lot of pledges are made, but we wonder whether there's tangible outcomes to that effect. So the economy is adversely impacted, and again, it's not the responsibility of anyone but the leaders that are within our society. Thing about our voting system in the country is that we have what I may want to rephrase for now as dangerous amnesia. That when things at election level, when we get to elections, we start using different measures to decide on who to vote for, and that's the biggest downfall. Where Rob gets it wrong is that he comes across like he is attacking and insulting. The minute because it starts disturbing the facts that he's raising. The minute you talk to people and you call them spineless, and you call them the worst idiots and things like that, doesn't add value to the conversation. And I can understand it comes from a point perhaps of frustration, but you lose credibility as a leader, even a business leader, especially when you dilute your message through insults. He could have said it exactly what he said without insulting. I've seen a similar view raised by Mzwanele, for example, talking about the comparison of leadership and whether the current president is actually a capable leader. But he raised this point and said, well, even if you compare him with the Mbekis, the Mandelas, and the Jacob Zumas, that he is not a leader in that interpretation. But the insults were not in the equation. And so, therefore, the point was made and understood, perhaps by me and perhaps by some of us. So the striking information that he shares about the crisis that we're facing in the country, unemployment, especially the 66% or more of young people that are unemployed. Those factors are crucial to discuss. And I think that the leaders in the room, and when I say leaders in the room, I'm talking about himself as president and his they need to start to speak the right language and start doing the right thing. And that means that you get rid of the problems. But unfortunately, we seem to be deferring the problem every single time instead of confronting it head on. We are not hearing, let's go back to energy, we're not hearing any type of strategy or plan. It's not the first time that the president actually returns from an overseas mission or trip to come and deal with us with a power problem, the electricity problem. 2 years ago or so. And so the reality is that we are not coping because our leaders are failing to lead.
Yeah,
I think just before you come in, Soji, I think Tsepo is not totally fair with Rob. Rob did not insult him. He was just not using what is called politically correct language. To say someone is spineless, that's not an insult. The guy is indeed spineless. There's absolutely nothing that Ramaphosa is known to be standing for. What is he actually standing for? It depends which forum he's addressing. When he goes to address the black business people there, he comes up and says all kinds of left-wing associated people. Before you know, he's tomorrow in some farmers meeting, he says something completely different. So that is indeed a spineless person. So I think the Rob is actually just brutally honest, and and by the way, I've defended him in some of the forums that he is not a racist in that he does not say all black people are like this. He gives you a name. He points out the people that he's dealing with. He doesn't generalize and say all black people are like this. Number two, he doesn't go around and saying what needs to happen now is that white people must take over and all of that. So it does not exude white supremacy tendencies, as it were, which would define a racist. So I really think that he's not being racist. He's just decided that the issue of political correctness has not assisted us. And this is the same point that, by the way, Neil Froman is making, that even he is tired of being politically correct. They've been trying to do this thing. It's just simply not working. So I really think that we actually need somebody that's going to be brutally honest with the situation, otherwise not going anywhere. The only thing that perhaps Rob should improve on is to say what is it that in particular corporate South Africa should be doing. For instance, I think there's absolutely no progress that will ever make in this country as long as we keep exporting our raw materials. And this is mainly the white corporates that do this, as it was. So Rob needs to confront his colleagues and say, if you look at how America built its economy, it built its economy by stopping sending all their raw materials to Europe. And they started to industrialize at their own backyard. So as long as the corporates in South Africa have not bought into the industrialization thing, as long as the corporates in South Africa have not stopped their European allegiances, we're not going anywhere. We need to respect the sovereignty of South Africa and need everyone, black and white in South Africa, to put South Africa first and ensure that we industrialize the big machinery. Instead of being an assembly plant here, we must be a manufacturing plant and build our own machines and build our own robots and do our own thing. Only if we do that are we going to be able to take this country to the next level.
Okay.
And the main people to do this is the corporates, Rob's friends.
Okay, I was almost saying I agree with Mr. Manyi there in everything, but I thought I know you want to say something. Look, and I want to say to thank our joking atheists and the viewers here who've been participating, the male Jody Taylor, thank you very much. We'll talk about what the opposition parties could be doing. But I think in due fairness, Mr. Manyi, the corporate South Africa doesn't determine South Africa's economic policy. We don't determine what's going to be exported or not. The ANC, African National Congress, which has been in power for 28 years now, of which the former president is Jacob Zuma, has the power, the political power to say this is how we're going to run to manage our natural resources. This much of it can be exported. This much there must be. Of course, we need a lot more work to be done in South Africa. Industrialization to create opportunities for people to create value in South Africa before stuff gets sold. But you can't blame that on corporate South Africa. Really.
No, look. Here's the situation. That what you just said is probably a blue sky theory. The reality is that there is a difference between what happens in South Africa and what the ANC does. And one of the things I've always told the comrades is that they have all these interesting policies that they do, but what the ANC does not have is what I call conversion conference. They need to have a conversion conference where all the lofty things that they have, they then turn them into government policy. As things stand right now, South Africa is run by government policy, and people must learn the difference between ANC policy and government policy, although most of it would have been influenced by the ANC. But for instance, the issue of procurement, the procurement policies right now are pro-big business, because procurement policy, which is a government policy, it says that 90% of the points shall be awarded to the lowest price. Now, I always make an example of Ntate Maponya, the late, and Ackerman, that at no point in any time can Ackerman and Maponya compete toe-to-toe. Ackerman will always have a cheaper price. So therefore, the whole economic...
Why would Ackerman have the cheaper price?
Because he's got economies of scale. He's got economies of scale is big. So he'll always have a cheaper price. And also his cost of borrowing are much lower. I mean, just look at classically, if you stay in Soweto, by virtue of you staying in Soweto, you are then redlined and all of that. And when everybody else is borrowing at prime -5, you are borrowing at prime +10. So your cost of doing business, if you are in your still affected by the apartheid spatial development, your cost of doing business are very high, as it was. So that's the situation that we have, and therefore I'm saying that the policies that we have right now. I mean, let's look at the construction sector, CIDB. If you look at that act, CIDB, for the construction people, the people that get the biggest projects to build bridges and all of that are people at CIDB level 9. And how many black people are there? Only 1 or 2. The rest is mainly the established business.
Is that where the construction mafia comes in? But before we get deeper into this, Mr. Manyi, we'll come back to this. I just need Mr. Trollip to come in and comment on some of the things that have been said by yourself, by Tsepo, and then we'll take it on from there.
Well, look, I just want to talk about the subject that we started on, Rob Hersov's commentary. I think the weakness about Rob's input was that it was pretty much the same as his second talk at Business News Conference and the first one. Remember, he famously said at his first one that if Mandela was alive, he'd vote for the Democratic Alliance. Now, that's basically saying that Mandela would be embarrassed with what's happened to the ANC. And, you know, a year and a half has gone by since Rob made that first talk. And we must stop talking in South Africa. We must start doing. And I think Mzwanele was saying the same thing. This is our country. We must fix it. We must stop lamenting what's happened to SAA and about what's happened to Eskom. It's actually been neglected for so long. And all we've done is we've become a bloated state-owned enterprise employment agency. If you look at the productivity at Eskom, that's what the greatest cost is. The cost of employment and productivity is poor.
But there's a difference between neglect and mismanagement.
They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand.
Okay.
If you aren't managing properly, you're neglecting. And maintenance is something that the ANC government and all the state-owned enterprises are really not good at. Good at employing people, not holding them to account. If you want an example of that, it's our ports. There was a recent World Bank research survey done about the productivity of ports around the world, 351 ports. Durban was last in productivity, followed by Ngqura and Cape Town. So our 3 major ports are the 3 least productive in the whole world. Now that speaks volumes about what kind of government we've got. But I did see one of the people following this debate, male Jody Taylor, saying, you know, what are the opposition offer? It says they're immature, they're reinforcing the failure of the ANC. Well, if we don't talk about the failure of the ANC, we're never going to be able to identify Kufe Pitole. Where is the problem? And the problem is actually with the ANC. And Antonio Gramsci, Italian philosopher, described this problem really well for me. He said, the problem exists precisely because the old is dying and the young cannot be born. And in this interregnum, there is a host of morbid symptoms. The morbid symptoms in this country are best exposed by what's happened to Eskom, and the old must die so that the young can be born. And to answer male Jody, and I say, I agree that the whole political establishment in South Africa, all the political parties that are currently in parliament, currently in legislatures, currently in failed municipal councils across the country, they must take responsibility for this mess that we're in. And Action SA is a new political party. It's a melting pot of people that have come from all different political organizations that have had enough of the failure of the current establishment. And I said at that same conference, South Africans are wanting leaders that will point us in the right direction and stop pointing fingers at each other, because that is puerile and it's pathetic. And all this blame shifting to, whichever party is in government, this one blames Van Riebeck and the next one blames apartheid. And so you go, it's pathetic.
Look, Tsepo, I'll let you in. Look, until 2024, the African National Congress has the electoral mandate in South Africa. We know that in December, they're going to elect a new set of leaders. We also know that the part of the ANC that's coalesced around Zuma, and this was confirmed by Mr. Carl Neos in a recent discussion, and Mr. Manyi pretty much said it. They don't have confidence in the current leadership of the African National Congress and Zuma and the Ramaphosa, and Carl Neos went further to say we don't want the entire NEC must go. Now, Mr. Manyi, you seem to be quite close to President Zuma. If Ramaphosa gets defeated in December, until South Africans don't have a choice, obviously, parallel to that, the opposition parties need to work together to prepare for 2024. But we can't remove the ANC from power until 2024. What kind of leaders do you think there are in the mind of the coalition around Zuma, of the faction around Zuma, to replace Ramaphosa so that South Africa can stand up on its feet again? Because much of the road, it's still my view that much of the road happened under Zuma. And Zuma has a lot of responsibility to take.
No, that's correct. A few things. Firstly, starting with what Athol has been saying here about people must take accountability. For instance, with the African Transformation Movement, which is the one party in that parliament that is doing everything it can do to make sure that there's accountability. Right now, the reason we have a Section 89 process and the impeachment process is because of the African Transformation Movement that has started that process. And one hopes that the members of parliament that are there, that are interested in the well-being of South Africa, are going to stop voting en bloc, as it were. They're going to vote with their consciences. And if their consciences are very clear, there must be no doubt that everyone, even in their little private corners, they know that Ramaphosa is messing up. So if we get rid of Ramaphosa as the president of the country, that's a very good start. And this is where we would appeal as the ATM to everyone in parliament to do what is right for South Africa, as it were. Even for their own ANC, it is in the interest of what they've been saying that must happen. I mean, this guy does not even implement even their own ANC resolutions. I don't know why they are keeping him in the ANC. He's good for no one, as it were. So the sooner we get rid of him, then we'll see a better breath of fresh air going forward. And I think it's important to also understand the processes of parliament, that if we don't see much progress, there are processes that, and the time is ripe even now, to even look at the dissolution of parliament if we don't think that things are going right. So we don't really have to wait for 2024. If we think that things are going the way they should, that thing can be dissolved and we can start afresh sooner rather than later. And I suspect.
Yeah, whom do you have in mind if you to replace Zuma? And so before you respond to that, Tsepo, there's a question there about the impact of what the ANC has done to South Africa on South Africa's image international. Maybe I think you're best suited to talk to that. But I want to hear from Mr. Manyi. Look, we don't have it. Whatever happens in parliamentary process, the ANC has the electoral mandate till 2024. Whom, in your view, do you think would be best suited to replace Ramaphosa? Is it the current deputy or somebody else?
Yeah, that's a difficult question.
And I know that you're talking in a personal capacity. Just I want Mr. Manyi's view.
No, look, let me tell you what I think is better and is the best person to replace Ramaphosa. So actually, first of all, we need a young person. We need somebody without a baggage. We need a unifying figure. The actual president of the ATM, Vuyo Zungula, a very solid young man, qualified, even academically, young, very energetic. That's the kind of person that we need. As we sit here and now, you cannot point one scandal of this guy. But anyone else that you can bring from that side, there's always this or that about them. So I really think that we need the kind of maturity that will allow a young person to emerge. So if you ask me, I think Vuyo Zungula could be the guy that can help bring this country back to where it should be.
But he's not ANC, and you started you are the founder of the ATM party, aren't you?
No. Let's correct that. Let's correct that. No, I'm nowhere near founding of the ATM. The ATM was founded in 2018. I was very much within the ANC along at that time. I only joined the ATM in 2019, in January around 2019. They had already even populated their top 5 by the time I came in. I have absolutely nothing to do with that. And let me also use the opportunity to dispel the myth that ACE has got nothing to do with the formation of the ATM. President Zuma has got absolutely nothing to do. This organization was formed as a result of a historical vision of within the church called the TACC. That's actually, truth be told, that's actually the church that has given birth to the ATM, the 12 Apostles Church in Christ. That's the one under the leadership of Prophet Zuma. So those are the
Mr. Manyi. Okay, let's have please, Mr. Trollip, come in, and then Seppo, I need you to make your comment. Mr. Trollip,
sorry, with respect, I think Mzwanele didn't look at the topic. The topic was about Rob Hersov's speech, and one of the people who've been typing here says that, you know, we mustn't be paternalistic and explain to people who already know the pain that the ANC has caused South Africans. The topic was for us to come and talk here about Rob Hersov's speech and the impact and the import of that speech.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up then, it's come up now in this discussion.
Can I just explain that? Sorry. So we were going to discuss on this platform key stories impacting on South Africa. Trollip was the headline of our newspaper for today. So we have to discuss him, but it's okay to discuss other things as well that are important to contemporary South Africa.
Okay, so we'll talk about whatever we like and how we formed our parties and who didn't.
No.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Solly, here's the thing.
Please go ahead.
One of the topics, and it often it's on many people's lips, this concept of what-ifism. What will happen if Cyril Ramaphosa can't explain Phala Phala? What will happen if Ramaphosa is removed at the ANC conference, and who will replace him, and will the sky fall on South Africa, and all that nonsense? I don't fear the future of South Africa without the ANC. I fear, because Action SA and other political parties are going to be part of that future. I fear every day that the ANC is still in power, because they have shown that they are completely incompetent. Wherever I go, people say, don't tell us about our lived realities, and I don't do it, because that would be really inane to tell people about their conditions of life in this country. They're bad, and people are battling, and there's massive unemployment. We need change. We need the ANC to make a really bad decision, either to fire Ramaphosa or to appoint somebody like Ace Magashule to lead the ANC, so that it can finally die and new trees can start growing in this political forest of us. But you know, Rob Hersov mentioned some names, and I think that's where Rob Hersov is actually a bit out of touch. You know, he said that he thought Gayton McKenzie would make a good president. Now, you asked Mzwanele who would make a good president, and he said Vuyo Zingula. I reckon Herman Mashaba would make a really good president, but Gayton McKenzie wouldn't make a good president. Because 2 days before Rob Hersov said that, Gayton McKenzie went against the coalition and gave the city of Knysna back to the ANC. So you know, he reminds me a lot of Julius Malema. They flip-flop on almost every single topic you can get. Whatever suits them one day, they'll do it, and the next day they won't do it. That's very, very dangerous. But you know, the other name he mentioned was that Makhosazana Meth would make a good Minister of Health. I don't know where he comes from, because the health department in the Eastern Cape is completely broken, and she's the MEC for health. So we must be very careful of meeting people at cocktail parties or having tea with them and thinking, oh, this person sounds very nice and make a good minister. I know he was making an illustration, but what we really need is to identify competent South Africans who can get the job done. Start looking at meritocracy. Start looking at accountability. Start holding people to account. Put their feet to the fire if they don't keep the lights on. And if they don't keep the lights on, replace them. And that's what we need. Stop being cuddly and, you know, comradely through cadre deployment. That's the worst thing in South Africa, because nobody gets. Mzwanele Manyi said, speak to America. America's famous 3 words were, you are fired. That's how they built an economy.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a quick one.
Okay.
A quick one. I think it's important to contextualize Rob as a person in the first instance. At the point that he makes himself is that although personally, as we speak here now, he's a billionaire, but he still has not inherited the billions of his father, Basil Hersov, who recently turned 96. So he's going to be even a bigger billionaire. He was making life quite comfortably in Europe. The guy has come back not because he needs anything, and the reason he's got freedom of speech, Rob, is because he's got nobody can turn the tap on him, as it were. He wants to grow and he wants to give South Africa a chance. So for me, I think people like Rob are the real patriots that this country should look after, and to say how many other Robs out there. These are the people that are saying, let's take South Africa, let's build on what we have and take the country forward. He is tired of nursing people. He is tired of all this political correctness. He is saying that's what we've been doing all this time and nothing is working. So he's getting hurtful with this, and that's why the language is a bit crude. But I insist that it didn't insult anyone. It's just being forthright and saying and calling it for what it is. You know?
I totally agree with you. I think at some point we need to raise volume. That's what he did, raise the volume. Every name that he mentioned, including Rob is just a private citizen. It's not up to Rob who's going to be the minister of this and that in the future. He has the right to say what to express himself and to be as angry. I am very angry. Many of us are angry at what's going on in South Africa. So I have no problem with Rob. People must not be afraid that the next parliament or for leadership of South Africa is going to be chosen by Rob. It's just a citizen. Simple. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's important, I think, for us to be pragmatic as well. So where I struggled with Rob and the rents, if I may call them that, or his expression, because it is free, all of us can express ourselves. But where I struggled is that I'm not picking up a very, and I've listened to different points he makes, including the potential independence of the Western Cape. For whatever reason. But I didn't get the reality is that we have a strong political party, or what used to be a strong political party that runs the country for almost 3 decades. And in the recent decade, towards the end of the last decade, they seem to be losing momentum, impetus, and control at a rapid pace. And there I struggled. And then you have the individual political parties that are beginning to make important shifts in opposition parties. I mean, important shifts in provincial and municipal levels. And that what we struggled with is the noise and maybe good for optics and for the cameras, but the key question that's very, very important that I would have expected him to be talking about are critical cooperations, let me call it that, because the minute I say coalition, it becomes something else. But critical cooperations between the parties that we've mentioned in this room, ATM and of course Action SA and various others, so that collectively you start a discussion and you start forming something that looks like it can pose a significant threat to what has been the hegemony of the ANC. And then, of course, you asked me about the image, one of the viewers, the image that the ANC's actions or inactions have done to the country. I mean, I don't have to tell you the headlines. We struggled last year with the July unrest for various reasons, but partly some of the reasons that you find in underlying in those unrest is that because people, there were 3 types, somebody said, of people there. There was somebody who was looting because they've got a political intent. There are those that were there observing, and the third one, there were those that were there to collect something so they can go and eat, to be honest with you. And all those problems happen because we have an ANC that is not governing. When you look at the pillars of governance, one of those being the economic sector of our country, our beautiful country. In that environment, we're failing. We're failing. The current leadership, at least, is failing on many levels. It's very difficult to go and pinpoint the positives. In fact, we try to do an exercise like this in recent times to figure out what are the good news that we can tell people so that we can tell a great story about our country, if you will, some optimism. It's very hard to find good news in the last couple of years, at least. In the country. And that tells you that the same message is being heard by investors around the world. I know some will say, which investors? But there are investors, there are individuals around the world who are keen to support South Africa. And I think Rob is raising important point. Where I struggle is with its practicality, because if we go back to that discussion about dangerous amnesia, that South Africans will spend 5 years and complain that they've been struggling in the 5 years. When the time comes to go and cast their vote, the majority of them still goes in the same direction consistently. So politically, some of us in this room may argue that that is changing, and it's changing quickly. But hopefully we have more men and women like Mr. Manyi and Mr. Trollip who are willing to have this kind of a conversation, and hopefully spark some interest around cooperation. Because this large number of political parties, for example, when Manyi left the DA together with Mr. Herman Mashaba, not together, but at the same time almost, I thought they would go and collaborate. Because they both each bring a unique set of a unique set of action. And then when you look at the talent such as Mr. Manyi in the room, you also expect that politically speaking, if that is still his interest, that you would engage in spaces for collaboration, cooperation. And I think we're better off and we know this as a collective. Than a sporadic individual, one movement here, two movement here, and then.
But
Can I just say this?
The important thing in all of this for me is honesty. I think as long as we keep lying to each other, we're not going to get anywhere. I mean, if you look, for instance, on the July unrest and all of that, to say if South Africa was honest to say what was the nub of the problem in that July unrest, keep President Zuma aside, keep the Concord aside.
You can't keep him aside. You can't keep him aside.
The truth of the matter is that the independent panel of experts that did the research on this thing found that the center was not holding. There is something called National Security Council, which is chaired by Ramaphosa. And this is the structure that was not sitting to receive intelligence information. When Ayanda Dlodlo was being blamed for not speaking to Pigicele, Ayanda Dlodlo was very clear that no, actually, I don't have a duty to speak to Cele. My team had all the information, but there was nowhere to take it to, because the place to take it to was not sitting. So actually, if truth be told, a person that caused the problems last year is Ramaphosa, and by not convening that National Security Council, I mean, there were already all kinds of intelligence information about what is going to happen and all of that 2 weeks before this thing happened. But there was no way to process it. Lastly, I think some of the, going back to Rob's issues, for instance, the point that he makes, which I think is very important, is the issue around energy. If you look at the issues around energy, you say to yourself, South Africa, in terms of world pollution, is not actually even in the top 10 world polluters. But when they go to these environmental summits and COP whatever, when they get there, they make the most stringent, the most catastrophic commitments for the country. Why would you, in the height of unemployment, go around closing mines, fast-tracking, closing coal mines? Why do we lie to South Africa and say that the jobs will move from the coal mines into the renewables, when we know that in the renewable space, it's a different set of skills that are required? Here in the coal mines, you've got a lot of Tatanabegala kind of situation. There's not much thinking required from a labor point of view. But on the other side, is instrument technicians and all of these sophisticated technologies. So if you have a dishonesty in the analysis, we're not going to get anywhere.
Let me say, I think Mr. Manyi must be in Parliament. We need his voice in there. It'd make a very good politician. But here's a point I would like to make. First of all, two things. One, I'm struggling with Mr. Manyi's refusal to acknowledge that the current problems did not start with Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa has been a total disappointment in a lot of ways. There's no doubt about it. But the problems that we face, the cancer that has entered the system, the South African system through the African National Congress started with Zuma. Zuma handed the country to the Guptas. It's out there. Zuma was responsible. It's been published by investigative journalists, by publications. It's been out there. It's in the Zondo Commission. This man continues to refer to the court. I think we would be lying to ourselves when we want to found a good conversation on a basis of lies. Okay, Zuma needs to face his day in court. But then going into the future, South Africans are tired of a situation where political parties in the opposition want to wait to see who gets what, and then start comparing notes to decide, okay, you get this position, you get this position. Isn't it time? And this is a question to both you gentlemen, Sebo, of course, you can comment on it. We have about 10 minutes, 8 minutes to finish. Please don't be long. Don't you think there's an opportunity to do things differently for political parties to come together, not after the elections, but before the elections, to propose a program that will appeal to most South Africans, especially those people who stopped voting because none of the political party brands today appeals to them, to get them to be excited about a South Africa again? Is there an opportunity to do that? No, let's get Athol to go, and then you go, please, if you like. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I was just smiling to myself when you said Mzwanele would do well in Parliament. He'd be appalling in Parliament because you have speaking time, and you've got to say your say in a short period of time. Look, I agree with you on one thing, that you cannot divorce Jacob Zuma and his children from the July insurrection last year. You cannot do that. They must answer for their role in that first. And then I also agree with Rob Hersov in that, you know, Edmund Burke, a British politician at the turn of the last century, said, evil prevails when good men do nothing or say nothing. So I like the fact that there are more and more South Africans finding their voice and speaking up. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Chepo said that what we need is more pragmatism. We need to start finding solutions to the challenges. Mm-hmm. And I believe that all the old political isms of the past are really old-fashioned and outmoded. Communism, socialism, liberalism, federalism, republicanism, all of those isms, they are passé as far as I'm concerned. We need a big dose of pragmatism in South Africa. And Lee Kuan Yew, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, had that in spades, and his successful presidency that turned a third world country into a first world country was based on 3 words, and they were defined by these letters. The first one was M for meritocracy, find the best person, not the whitest person or the most advantaged person, find the best person to do the job, and the job will get done. The second one was pragmatism, and Deng Xiaoping described that best. He said, it doesn't matter what color the cat is, black or white. If it catches mice, good cat. And then honesty and integrity, and all the words that are synonymous with that are distinctly missing in our public leadership discourse. You know, one of his ministers went on an overseas trip, didn't declare it. He was charged and sent to jail because he said there must be, you know, nefarious intention with that trip. So my last 30 seconds, I want to say, until we start attracting investment, foreign direct investment into this country, and we won't as long as our ports are inoperable and unproductive, if we don't have water and energy, if our roads are impassable and our politics are bad, we will never attract foreign direct investment. So we need a whole new focus on what it is that will bring foreign direct investment so we can break this cycle of dependency that the ANC has forced on people and is cheating people with 350 Rand a month. It's an absolute disgrace to think that you can take care of people for 350 Rand a month.
Do you, I mean, the former president of Singapore was a benevolent dictator. I'm not sure that a benevolent dictator would survive in the South African system.
It would be a lot better than the current dictatorship that we've had under the ANC. A lot better.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that the African Transformation Movement wants to introduce into the politics of the country is honesty. You see, for instance, the DA is one of the most dishonest parties in the country. For instance, they got very lofty language about equality for all and all of that, when in fact the truth of the matter is that if you are to treat, if you are to to give equal treatment to unequal people. Basically, you are entrenching inequality, because all that means is that you lift the base with the same equal amount. So whatever discrepancies were there when you started, you perpetuate them into the future. So we need honesty. That's the first thing. Secondly, again, on the issue of honesty, if you look at that Zondo report, which was based on Madonsela's report initially, Madonsela's report, almost 50% of that report was dealing with the GENCO issues with Brian. Now, all the input that Brian gave about GENCO there absolutely just disappeared. So there's no honesty in that Zondo report. So if we're saying we want to fix the country, GENCO must talk to the issues of the one that Brian has been talking about in that report. Zondo just decided to just gloss over those issues. As it were. Also, even the conflict issues of Ramaphosa himself, as far as that GENCO company is concerned, Zondo just decided to just brush them over purely because it's fashionable to just blame everything on Zuma. So let's be honest and deal with the issues as they are factually, and stop brushing and doing the easy route and just blame Zuma for everything.
Okay, I know Zuma is not blamed for everything. I mean, Ramaphosa is responsible for a lot. No, many of us don't forget that he was deputy to Zuma all these years. He hasn't come up to say, this is what I've seen, this is what I've heard. So all of that, the ANC, entire ANC, I mean, right now we're arguing about whether or not load shedding 7 is better than 8. The entire ANC is load shedding. It must be out of power, in my view.
In fact, I must say this, sorry, I must say this. I think what needs to happen here and now is a state of emergency on energy. We've come to that point now. We need that. Government must cut red tape, must cut everything to ensure that we get back. I mean, we can't have a situation that today there are talks about stage 8 load shedding. That's a disaster. So if Ramaphosa is coming back, he must come back to declare a state of energy disaster. That's what he must do. That's the only good thing that he could come back for.
I agree with you. I don't know what it would entail, but I totally agree with you on that point. But gentlemen, you still haven't answered my question. And before I hand over to Seppo, you haven't told me, would you guys, the parties that you represent, be prepared to speak, to get together into a room before the elections and say, let's set our differences aside, let's have a discussion about what's good for South Africa? Are you prepared to do yes or no? It's not a long answer.
Well, look, I'd like to start with that. I mean, I was invited to come on the show initially to talk to somebody else from the ANC, but they never come to debates because you can't defend the indefensible. I've enjoyed talking to Mzwanele. I think South Africans in this country right now are learning to cooperate together during these coalition governments. Some of them work well, some are not working so well, but they're going through a learning process. I think South Africans have got a long way to go to find each other. You know, we come from separation, hundreds of years of separation. Right. So I think these kind of discussions are good. A lot of stuff that Mzwanele was talking about, I didn't always necessarily align him to those sentiments. So we have preconceived ideas, and the more we talk, the better we do. I remember when I started in politics, in representative politics, I was in the Athol district municipality. I was co-opted onto the executive by ANC returning exilees and people who had the very best intentions. Those are good days of cooperation, collaboration together to get the job done. I think we can do that, and we're learning to do that. But we really need to identify where the problem is as well and deal with the problem and extract it roots and all.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Sep, I want to allow all of you. I'm going to allow all of you a minute to just say your last message, but let me give Seppo first the stage. Seppo, what do you make of all of this? And after that, we'll let Mr. Manyi and Mr. Trollip say their last closing remarks.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging to have this discussion with people who have an interest, such genuine interest in the country. You can see it, you can feel it in the tone of the narrative. There are probably 2 or 3 words for me that are coming across as central to our discussion. The first one is authenticity, and I think Rob was trying as far possible to be authentic, because when you are authentic, you can identify the problems and you can deal with the problems decisively. A second word is around consistency, and that, you know, we need some degree of consistency from our leaders. And lastly, how do we get ourselves in now and not beyond when the problem is a crisis. How do we get ourselves around the table and cooperate more? I think that cooperation is the one that's going to help us fulfill the many promises that we're making to South Africa. Because when you listen to all political parties, none of them are against South Africa. I think everybody has good intentions. It is just in us, there seems to be a lack of speed in doing this cooperation.
Okay, who wants to go first? Mr. Trollip, Mr. Manyi, last words. Trollip,
Okay.
Mr. Manyi?
Yeah, let me say this, that firstly, your direct answer to your question, the ATM, for instance, will be happy to discuss with anybody that wants to put South Africa as the interest of South Africa, the country, more than the interest of parties, as it were. The problem is that some of the parties are preoccupied with their own internal dynamics. But if it's all about service delivery, if it's all about taking South Africa to the next level, the ATM is all for that. But I think going forward, also what is going to be important, particularly, for instance, me personally, I'm not an isms person. I don't like isms. I think the isms lock you into a corner that you can't get out of. I think the sooner we get out of the isms and we get to what is practical, what is pragmatic to do, we should do that. And one of the things that should be done, I think white people in this country have got a responsibility to answer the land question without any hatred or anybody hating them or vice versa. They sit with all the land. They need to say, what is it that can be done to ensure that there is some form of equitable distribution of some sort? And if that question is not answered, there'll never be peace in this country. And I think white people should actually lead in this thing. Right now, they're sitting at the back. They are ready to defend. They shouldn't do this. I have not come across a proposal by white farmers, by big landowners that are largely white. The last report in terms of the survey, 2017, white people own about 75% of the land of this country is owned by white people, as it were. Now, if you cannot have that discussion without white people leading the discussion. So my appeal is that they must lead the discussion, because the ANC in parliament has failed, because the ANC has lied to people. They have said to people they're going to do expropriation without compensation. That's what the word they've got out there. But when they got to parliament, they changed. They don't have expropriation without compensation even in the bill. What we have there now is expropriation with nil compensation, something fundamentally different. So for me, I have a problem when people start to lie. Just have a problem with lying. So I really want to appeal to white people, honestly, to say, can you please put a proposal to South Africa to say, what is it that we can do to ensure that everybody must feel that they are part of South Africa? And as things stand, a lot of black people don't feel that they are part of South Africa because of the land issue. So really, that's my closing comment. I really want white people in particular to do this and lead the country.
Okay, Mr. Trollip. Thank you, Mr. Manyi.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to say that I'd avail myself to come back here and have a debate about land. I think it's a very good debate, and it's not something you can conclude in 1 minute. Very happy to come back and have a debate about land and how we make land productive in our country. There's too much moribund land that's not used, and all of it's held by the state. All of it is held by the state and is totally unproductive. So I think what we need in South Africa are a couple of things. First of all, I believe our politics in South Africa is very puerile, very childish, and it's based on enclave politics. You know, if you're black, you belong to the ANC. If you're white, you belong to the DA. If you're Zulu, you belong to the regional EFF party. Or if you yellow, you this color or whatever. It's pathetic. We need a South African party. We need a party that accommodates all South Africans. And that's why my political change and reawakening or rebirthing, whatever you want to call it in Action SA, has been liberating for me, because I'm meeting people from all political backgrounds. And I think that that's really good for South Africa. So we can, as long as we don't bring out, our infectious diseases from those political parties and reinfect Action SA, I think it'll be good for South Africa. And I'm looking forward to that. But I believe we also need political maturity in this country that has been sadly lacking. We are too parochial. We are too linked to the ism part of our parties. We need leaders that are going to lead and are going to start being honest with each other, as Mzwanele said, about being honest. Look each other in the eye, deal with the issues that are troubling this country, be honest, give leadership, and lastly, speak up. The churches, the religious fraternity waited for 46 years to speak up about apartheid. Please don't wait for another 47 years to speak up about the corruption that's going on in the ANC. Speak up, pick a side, stand with that side, and be brave enough to do that. And I thought Rob Hersov was doing that. I agreed with Chepo that some of the language was intemperate and it causes offense, but at least he spoke up. And I want to challenge civil society to speak up about the challenges and leaders to rise up and to lead.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Before you close, Solly, I want to propose that all parties must adopt the ideology of the ATM. The ideology of the ATM is humanism. We say we all belong to one race, the human race. I think if we were to accept that and internalize that, a lot of the problem will be solved. Because if we all consider ourselves as human, and therefore it will be difficult for people to do all these heinous things to other people, and then Ubuntu will come through and all of that. So we need to be values-based. One of the big things about corruption that will never be able, no law will solve corruption. Corruption is actually a values thing. You need you as a person to be a changed person. You need to be ethical as a person. Only when you've done that as a person can you be able to resist corruption. So I really want to sell that thing of humanism for all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matseba, do you want to say something before we finish?
No, thank you. I think this is a great start, and it's a very encouraging discussion to see. We also need to, at some point, deal with the Palapala matter and how soon that can be resolved. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been an amazing conversation. I think we all need to get South Africans to choose not between one party and another. Now we need them to choose between what is good for South Africa, and you seem to agree. I think there's a beginning of a discussion here about what's good for South Africa. What are the values that you want? If you close your eyes today and you imagine South Africa in the next 10 years, what do you see? When we have this conversation within my party will do this, your party won't do this, we end up losing each other very easily. Let's start with the basics about our humanity, as Mr. Manyi has said. This has been another conversation on WorldView. This is where we, of course, explore everyone's perspective on all those things that can enhance and broaden our worldview. We're going to talk about the land expropriation or the land issue, the land question. We're going to talk about white people. Are they all one homogeneous people, black people? How do we break the silos once and for all and get South Africa to where it needs to go? But gentlemen, we'll meet again soon. Thank you very much for joining us. And for those viewers who've been participating in these discussions, we love you all. Mr. Trollip, Mr. Manyi, Mr. Matseba.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.